Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Zul Verji, and on behalf of Waterstones and Blackwells, I'd like to say a huge welcome to the magnificent Sheldonian Theatre. Welcome to this celebration of a book that we've all been looking forward to a great deal. It feels like the end of a huge literary odyssey that we've all been on over the last 30 years. But we're here, of course, to hear Philip Pullman talk about the Rosefield with Hannah MacInnes. Now, just a couple of very quick housekeeping announcements before I hand over to Hannah. For those of you who haven't collected your prepaid book, you'll be able to do so at the end. This station will be reopened, and ditto, if you'd like to actually buy a copy of the book, then the station at the other corner there will be open for business and happy to help. My only remaining duty is really to introduce Hannah MacInnes, and then she in turn will introduce us to the event. So Hannah is a broadcaster and interviewer who has worked across broadcast and print media. We're very grateful to her for her participation. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to Philip and Hannah.
It's a very lovely welcome, and it's wonderful to see so many of you here. A beautifully sold-out Sheldonian, which is, of course, no surprise to anyone, given this very rare and unique event. So actually, I should be just saying very well done for getting your hands on the most coveted ticket in town. As you heard, I'm Hannah MacInnes. I'm so delighted to welcome you on behalf of Blackwells, on behalf of Waterstones, to share the stage with, without doubt, one of our greatest and most renowned master storytellers, and to be doing so discussing and celebrating the publication of, you can see my book, slightly wizened and full of paper notes, which we'll hopefully get through. The final part, after 3 enchanting decades of his dark materials, The Book of Dust, the story of Lyra Silvertongue. I'm not sure if you've read it yet. We will try and talk about as much of it as possible. I've got some questions from you as well to get through. It takes us on a wonderful journey across the world. We meet new characters. We see again some that we know very well, some that we've come to love. We'll be able to delve into as much as we can in the mind of where it came from. Philip needs no introduction. He is, as I've said, one of our most respected authors writing today. He's won so many awards. If I reeled them off, I'd be here still going at the end of the hour, so I'm not going to do that. His books have sold millions of copies and been translated into all sorts of languages across the world. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you all, and I feel that this is about as fitting as a location that we could get. Oxford itself as a city, where it began, and it really has such resonance for Lyra and for you. I just wonder if you could sort of touch on the magic of this city.
Yes, I first came to Oxford as a boy of 18 on a morning that was very like this, as I remember. Sunny day, blue sky, these beautiful golden buildings all around. I sort of fell in love with it, I suppose. Yeah. And I was coming up for an interview for a place at Balliol, which I didn't get. But I was offered a place at Exeter College instead, which suited me fine. And I found myself in a world that I'd read about. You know, we're all sort of familiar with the Dreaming Spires and the grass in the quad and the Porter's Lodge and all these places. But I'd never been in a college before. I'd never been to a public school of that sort. So it was all a bit strange, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Besides, all around me, it was 1965. The 60s were going on, and you know, it's... I had a very good time here.
Again, I'm sure that, that could be a whole conversation for an hour in itself as well. But I think that as I understand it, the leaping across rooftops of Lyra is actually founded in some sort of reality.
Yes, I was never a leaper, and I was never much of a climber, but I discovered that my window, I was in one of the top floor rooms in Exeter College, my window opened onto a little, it looked like a little trackway or something. There was a great big balustrade in front made into battlements, you know. And behind that was a gully about 2 feet wide into which I could climb and go along without being seen by anybody else, and get into the bathroom window of the next staircase and go downstairs to the party that was taking place down there without having to pay my 2 bob on the way in at the... So it had advantages like that. And going on walks, which I used to do, I used to love walking around Oxford, exploring the place, not just the university, but the city itself, Paradise Square, for example, and all the buildings down there, the beautiful old terraced houses for workers in the gasworks and places like that, and the canal and the river and the whole thing, the whole Oxford thing. I enjoyed it so much I didn't do a stroke of work. That was true of many of us, from the Bertie Wooster types to the grammar school yobs like me. There are better things to do than look, you know.
I mean, so you weren't a leaper, but you were, like Lyra, walking around on the rooftops. And I know it's very simplistic to read an author into their main character, but is it fair to say you and Lyra do share quite a lot?
Well, it's fair, but I wouldn't necessarily agree with you. You see, I don't believe in looking for the author's view on anything, because I was in charge of this book. Everything about it was under my command. Absolute power of life and death over every character, every full stop, every paragraph ending. Me, I'm in charge. I'm the boss. I was a dictator.
Yep.
And then I handed it over to my editor and realized that I hadn't been in charge at all. No, he's extremely good. He read the book with his usual carefulness and thoroughness, and was able to point out to me the 1,001 places where a different word here or a different... No, he didn't go, not that sort of level. I'm exaggerating slightly because he's in the audience. I'm just like teasing him. No, he could spot where the story flagged a bit or needed a bit of a kick, that sort of thing. And with his help and the help of my wife and other people who read it early on, I was able to make it into slightly better shape. What was your question?
Well, you've answered my question perfectly in terms of saying you're the dictator. I was asking whether you could read you into Lyra, and you were saying it's fair but not true. But
Yeah.
I'm really interested in that dictatorship, or the lack of democracy, you say, in the writing of the book. But it's then a very democratic enterprise once it goes out into the world, and you relinquish your control of it entirely in that sense.
Yeah.
How do you find that?
Well, the political, the small p aspect of this is I always found very interesting, because it is a dictatorship completely until I let go of it. Once it's in the bookshelves, on the tables in Blackwell's or Waterstones or wherever, I have no say in it at all. No. There are some authors I know, I think William Golding was one, who were very firm about how their books ought to be read. No, you've got that wrong. No, it doesn't mean that at all. It's quite wrong. It means that go back and look at that passage there. You'll see what I mean. No, I'd never say that. I can talk about the book because I too have an opinion about the book. Quite a good one. And I too have read the book. So I'm able to take part in the conversation about it. But my view of what it means and what it says and so on is not privileged just because I happen to have written it. And if somebody else points out to me that it's really an allegory of the Buddhist spread of the empire in the India of the 4th century, I'm fine, okay, yeah, you're right. I put that in deliberately, of course, in the hope that you'd notice. No, I think the author has to give up at one point, give up being in charge. It is a democracy, the democracy of reading. And whatever anybody brings to it is correct, it's right. Your experience, and it compares with something you once remembered, good, that's fine. And if I got this wrong or that wrong, okay, sorry, but go and write your own book if you think you can do better. But no, it is completely changed once the book is available to everyone to read.
And did you ever imagine when you first began on this journey and this adventure and brought us in that it would go on for 3 decades?
No, I really didn't.
Even anything close to that?
No, I thought from the beginning that the story that revealed itself to me was quite long. And because it wasn't a straightforward, realist, modern literary novel, there were other models that came into play, and one is the 3-volume fantasy, the great exemplar of which is The Lord of the Rings. Everybody was reading The Lord of the Rings in 1965 when I came up here. We were going about pretending to be Gandalf or something. Don't think anybody was pretending to be Gollum, but it was very fashionable. Anyway, so anyway, the 3-volume story was a ready model. So I, talking about it to the publisher, to editor, we had this sort of model in mind of a book that was going to be a story that was going to fill 3 volumes. But I certainly didn't mean it to go on any further.
I'm really interested in the way you describe that when you say when it revealed itself to me. I mean, how did that happen?
Well, I don't know.
But were you just
people often ask writers, where do you get your ideas from? You know? And I always say, this is my one gag, I don't know where they come from, but I know where they come to. They come to my desk, and if I'm not there, they go away again.
Okay.
But you've got to be sitting at your desk. I don't know, I just sit and twiddle my thumbs and dream and look at a map or something, and out of sheer boredom, eventually begins spinning yourself a story. But it's often characters that start it off. If you've got a character in your mind who's very interesting, or in whom you are very interested, or who you like very much, or you can see the outline of an event that looks interesting. The stories are not made of words, you see. They're not made of words, they're not made of pictures, they're not made of music. They can be imitated by all those mediums, but they're not made of those things. What stories are made of is events. And if you see some interesting events, you soon become interested in how, you wonder how they can be connected together. How did that fight on the harbour side lead to that scene in the garden? What's the connection? So, you know, you're building up a sort of basket work or something.
Yeah.
And it just happens. But when I got, to answer the other part of your question, when I got to the end of the 3rd book, The Amber Spyglass, I thought it was quite a good finish. But you see, Lyra was, I don't know, 12 or something. She's just had this amazing adventure. She's been to the land of the dead. She's been to the North Pole. She's fallen in love. What's she going to do now? Go to school and play netball? No, she's not. Lyra being Lyra, she's going to have other adventures. She's going to have other challenges and learn new things. So I found at the end of that book, after a bit of a rest, I put my feet up and wrote 2 or 3 other books. And then I came back to Lyra and I thought, we don't know what dust is yet, do we? Oh, no, that's right.
She'd be probably quite good at netball.
No, she'd kick and scratch.
But that's what you just said about storytelling and the way it reveals itself, and you sit at your desk and that's where the ideas come. There's this moment in the book where Lyra says of her storytelling, and don't worry, I promise I'm not trying to find you and Lyra the whole time, but the way of and the art of storytelling. She says, as the story unfolded, she felt like a musician playing a piece she knew by heart, knowing both where she was and where she was going, holding back a little here to make a more effective change in pace there, seeing the span of music to come, taking her time but wasting none, including a detail at this point so it would make its effect more strongly later, cutting out a detail that wouldn't help. Is that it? Is that?
So that's a good description of what I do.
You wrote, yeah.
Well, no, because it is, a story is not like a picture which exists in space, but not in time. There's no time in a picture. But in a story, of course, one event succeeding another, leading up to a third, and being caused by something all the way back there. This takes place in time. So inevitably, all the things that do work in time, like language, can help you or hinder you. For example, I wrote one passage in the story in the present tense, just one chapter, because I wanted to take the listener, the reader, out of the current of the story and put them in a little byway where things happen the same way every time. So you can do that with the present tense, but to tell a whole story in the present tense, I couldn't do. I can't read books written in the present tense. I don't want somebody messing with my entire conception of the space-time continuum just so they can write a book in a sort of trendy, fashionable... No. These things are all useful, and I like playing with them.
I mean, I said at the start, many notes in my book, so many themes, so many places that we could go. People will be able to read where we don't get to. But at the center of this is a search for the imagination.
Yes.
For what it is, they're trying all the way through to not just search for imagination, which is trying to be, there's a war against it, so in a way to save it, but to articulate it.
Yeah.
And they're always asking, what is it? I mean, it's a way of seeing that makes the world rich with meaning and alive with delight. At one point, we need things we can't explain, things we can't prove, or else we die of suffocation. Can you define the imagination?
Well, I can define it a little better now than I could when I started writing this story, because, as you say, it is about the imagination. What is it? Just to set the scene a little, in the previous book, The Secret Commonwealth, Lyra's demon Pantalaimon has been discontented with her. They've been ill at ease with each other. They don't get on anymore. And this was just one of the things I found I could do with the idea of the demon, a part of yourself, but who is separate to the extent that you can have a conversation with them, they can warn you, you can console each other, that sort of thing. And Pan, at the beginning of The Secret Commonwealth, has decided that Lyra has willingly surrendered, as it were, her imagination. She doesn't imagine things anymore. So that sets the story going, because he goes to look for her imagination, and she follows him, hoping to find out more about what it is that she's lost. And she does sort of perceive on the way that something has gone, something has changed, something is different. So she's thinking about it all the time. And what my conception of imagination is, well, in one word, it's dust. The dust that has been blowing through the stories since the beginning. Dust is what happens when our minds, our thoughts, encounter the thing I call the rose field. The rose field is like a magnetic field, an electric field, a gravitational field, or the Higgs field. It's a place where influences play. The rose field is the influence, is the place where dreams, imagination. No, I'm using that carelessly. Dreams, fears, hopes, memories, analogies, metaphors. Things like that live. And dust is what happens when we use the faculty of imagination to see what's there. You see, I see the imagination, and I think William Blake did as well, and I think the romantic poets like Wordsworth and Coleridge were onto the same sort of thing. It's not a way of making things up. That's not what your imagination does. Your imagination sees things that are there in the rose field, those kind of things, impalpable things, memories, and so on. And dust is the connection that we make with the rose field, and it makes with us. We are not just idle spectators, we're contributing to it. One of the first questions asked about dust is by the scholars in the retiring room in the very first chapter of the first book. Second chapter of the first book. And Lord Asriel is showing them a picture of what he claims is dust. And there's a man in the Arctic standing there, and a sort of ray of light or something is... And somebody says, is that coming down or going up? And that's a profound question, though he doesn't know it, and I didn't know it when I wrote it, because dust goes in both directions. Dust, the kind of dust I mean, the dust of our imaginations, feeds the rose field, nurtures it, nourishes it, and it feeds us too as we see what's there in the rose field. It's a two-way thing, but it is not. And this happens in a conversation, comes up in a conversation between Lyra and an angel about halfway through the book. And she's talking about the imagination. to this angel and gets what she thinks is a very disappointing response. I won't say anymore, it would take too long, but the point is, it is not just making things up.
No.
It is seeing things that are there, but invisible to those without imagination.
In this, it's under threat from a magisterium and people who would like to have an end to the imagination, an end to metaphor. Just hard, cold fact is a world they want. Do you see it as being under threat in the real world? And what from?
Yes, I do, in several ways. The imagination has always been a little dodgy. People in power, they don't know what it is. They don't know it's a way of perceiving things. They think it's a way of making things up. And because if you live in a theocracy, which might well be an atheist state like Soviet Union, completely atheist theocracy, because it worked like a religion. You had a holy book, which was the works of Marx. You had a prophet, who was the Karl Marx, and you had you had a priesthood, which was the Communist Party. You had a whole a view of history which led to it led to a conclusion that you already knew. It was the dictatorship of the proletariat, or it was the kingdom of heaven. And anybody that helped that movement along was good and a saint and to be rewarded. And anybody who hampered it was a traitor, a bourgeois deviant or something, and had to be destroyed, or a heretic and had to be burned. So the idea of this idea has always been found a bit dodgy. And in the 17th century, for example, in the post-Reformation, Counter-Reformation, and other places, people were actually writing books and preaching sermons against metaphor. Metaphor is a deadly thing because it says this thing is that thing, and they're not. They're not. They're completely different. Not similar, nothing at all to do with each other. This is the cast of mind that I call binary absolutism. And there are many examples of it in the world today. If you're not with us, you're against us. You know, that I hate that attitude. Binary absolutism. And so that's something that doesn't understand, like, or support the imagination.
Yeah, binary absolutism. Lyra uses that, doesn't she, in the story? But
Clever girl.
I mean, I suppose another. I want to come back to much of what you've just said in terms of the real world and those sort of threats that are out there, because they are all the way through all the books. But just one other slightly more simple, in a way, threat of the imagination people might think is that as you grow older, you lose it. Lyra even worries that that's why she is losing it. But I mean, you very much have not lost yours. You have the most vivid and extraordinary imagination. You've said to us it's just when you sit at your desk the ideas come. So they're not just always percolating. You're not meeting these characters. They're not with you as you go about your daily life.
Of course they are.
Yeah.
Of course they are, but you're doing other things. You know, you're making supper, or you're driving a car or something. They're there all the time. Yeah. Think of children in a classroom. How easy it is to a maths lesson or a geography lesson to sit back and even snore a little. But certainly, your mind is exploring and being curious and wondering about things all the time. And so it is with all of us, I'm sure. But some of us have been told or instructed or have decided for themselves not to trust this faculty. It's not true. You can't measure it. You can't weigh it. How much does it cost? Questions like that have no place in the rose field. But people insist on asking them and judging the world and judging themselves and what they own and what they see by those questions.
And I mean, that idea then of being a storyteller, and which you clearly are, is something else I think you explore again and again. What is the art of storytelling? And it's something sort of elemental. There's this moment where Lyra's talking about, writing stories is basically making patterns. It's like something that's been going on throughout the ages, similar to someone thousands of years ago sitting under a tree carving crisscross lines on a stick, and similar to someone cutting holes in a bone, blowing through it. So is there something sort of elemental that you feel about storytelling, something that you have this.
There is, and the carving patterns on a stick is one example. Another one is beating a pattern on a drum. Patterns, making patterns. It's very pleasing as a child or as a grown-up with time on their hands to make a pattern of something, to carve a stick into shapes, or to make patterns with sound, chords, shapes, rhythms, so on. There's something elementarily pleasant about that. It's fun. We do it because it's lovely. And that is the start of all art, I think, and all ways of exploring the imagination and fixing it for other people to see or hear or dance to or repeat and tell again. And, there are so many theories. The old idea that there are only 7 stories in the world, for example, which is, of course, nonsense, because there are, in fact, 11 stories in the world. And for a small fee, I can sell you a... patterns do recur in stories. The Cinderella pattern, for example, a young girl growing up who feels that she doesn't belong in this family. We've all felt that. Even those of us who are not girls. We felt, who are these awful people I have to live with? Surely I don't belong to them. I'm really a prince or a princess or something else. So the basic stories that occur in fairy tales and myths and legends and so on are very basic patterns because they're based on the relationships between people. And there can't be very many relationships between us. They can be lovers. They can be brother, sister, brother, brother. They can be father, son, or mother, daughter, or mother, son, as Freud would insist on including. Or, the relations between us are very few in number. And therefore, they will inevitably occur again and again in literature, in drama, in film, in all these folk song, all these places where we tell stories. These basic patterns will occur.
But then, of course, as you've said, that's the start.
Yeah.
But as Lyra has that conversation with the angel that you were alluding to, they go into what it is much, much more than that, perhaps, or much beyond that, is about the emotion that a story elicits. It feels like that's perhaps the really most crucial part for me of the story, when they're talking about the most important thing is the emotion that a dream or a story puts into your reader, the way it makes them feel.
Well, I think that's true about dreams in particular, because these books of interpretation, you dream about a flower, therefore this, that, or the other. You dream about a horse being shot, and you think that means that your Uncle Charlie will fall over and hurt his leg or something. Absolute nonsense, of course, all of it. And the psychoanalytic interpretation of dreams seems to me on not much more solid foundations than that, because what it means is not what the psychiatrist over there thinks. It's what you feel about it. The things I remember from the most significant dreams I've ever had are intense fear, intense love. You fall in love in dreams like nowhere else. It's just, you wake up and you're in a haze of joy that lasts for days. Those are the things that matter, not what actually happened in the story, because the story in dreams is rubbish. It's terrible. The script editor ought to be taken out and shot or something, because story doesn't matter. What matters is what you are feeling in the dream, and that's what lasts later on when you think about it. So emotion, of course, plays a part in a memorable story.
Yeah. And in terms of moving beyond these patterns, I think it also, to me, brings me back to why it's so important, or is it for you? It clearly is, to engage with the outside world within a story. So beyond those patterns and those emotions, it's about interrogating the world. And in this book and in the previous books, I mean, it's about an authoritarian society. And here it's hugely, feels to me, about corporate greed, climate change. I mean, there are a lot of, I wouldn't say grievances, maybe fears, worries of yours that come out in this book. And I'm just very interested to know whether that is just you, a sort of a catharsis, or whether you hope that that can impact your reader in a certain way, like what they can go away and do with those.
I don't know. I told you my first gag, my second and only other gag is to if I'm asked what do you want this book to make the reader feel, and what I make them want to feel most urgently is the impulse to go out at once and buy my next book. That's what I want them to feel. But in a moral sense, no. In a moral, it's about morality we're talking now. These are things, these questions that you mentioned, are things that I do think a lot about.
Yeah.
We all do. And if you're undertaking a task that is going to take you quite a long time, I didn't know it would take me 30 years, but I thought it might take me 3, but that's a long time. And if you're undertaking a task of that size, you don't go about it flippantly. You're not going to waste your time being frivolous in a task that's 30 years long. You take it seriously. So the matters you engage with as you tell the story are matters that you take or that you think are genuinely important. Otherwise, you couldn't do it. You couldn't be flippant and frivolous for 30 years. You'd go mad.
And I get the impression the matters that are important or are out there, the world has changed. I mean, I don't get the impression. I know the world has changed a lot since you started. And in a way, has the magisterium and what it stands for and those worries about the world, that's changed? Do you feel like it now represents something slightly different to you, that authoritarian body, than it did when you first started?
Well, it does. Because one of the great dangers that I saw 30 years ago was the danger of religion getting hold of politics. The danger of religion is not that it isn't true. That doesn't matter a bit. What matters in religion is what it does when it gets its hand on the levers of political power. That's when it's dangerous. That's when we have to watch out for it and you know, find arguments against it, defend yourself against it. But what wasn't quite so salient at that time, when I began the story, was, as you put it, corporate power. The ability of billionaires to buy politics, to buy political parties, to influence governments and parliaments in the way that they now can. It's always existed to an extent, of course, but it's now so visual, so vivid, so seeable that I don't think we can ignore it. Shouldn't ignore it for much longer, or we'll be, any pretense of real democracy will be taken away.
But when you say that, and in reading the book, there is that world, there is that worry that permeates it. There's a time where you talk that was about a wind coming, a hurricane to sweep all the old things out and replace them with the new, and a line there destroying everything, not making it better in the name of development. But there's also so much hope. I mean, in a character like Lyra, in what she believes in all of the characters, so much love and sort of community. You haven't given up that hope. Can the storytelling help us engage in those things and
I think
move in a different direction?
I think so. Yes, I've bent my microphone. Oh yes, because what we do does affect things. What we do in a small way, or what we do on a sort of world-sized stage. Yes, what we do does affect people all the time. And as for hope, I've always been struck by the fact that hope is one of the Christian virtues, religious virtues. It's not a temperament. It's not, oh, he's all right because he's always hopeful. It's not a temperament at all. It's a duty. It's a virtue. It's something that you have to do in order to be good. So it's not something that hope, is not something that you lose all hope and then you give up. It's your job not to be hopeless. It's your job to be hopeful. It's your duty.
Yeah. And a bit in storytelling, do you feel that there is a duty or a way in through your stories that your readers can, empathize with characters? In this, you take us to Syria, you show us an Aleppo of the past. There's people who are outsiders all the way through. And I'm just wondering, in doing that, whether you feel that there's a genuine power in this emotion and empathy for your readers to actually sort of shape and change the world for the better, to move away from that corporate greed that the magisterium...
I'm glad you used the word empathy. That's the right word. A lot of people talk about identify. You've got characters to identify. Who am I supposed to identify? Who do I identify? I don't think we do identify ourselves with characters like that. I didn't identify myself with Robin Hood when I read him. I didn't want to be Robin Hood. I wanted to be in Robin Hood's gang. In Robin Hood's, one of Robin Hood's friends and sitting with. So it was because I liked him and I liked the other characters there, like Little John and all those. I wanted to be in that group. And I think that's what we do in stories. We empathize. So if we find someone who's been horribly unfortunate, like the girl Nurhuda, who's swept off her boat in the Eastern Mediterranean and finds she's lost her demon in the process, but that means he's still alive, but he's been separated. I feel very sorry for her and what that means. So I hope that if I feel empathetic towards the characters, then readers will too. But who knows?
And empathise with all the characters, even the ones that we would assume are not good. Do you empathise? Do you have to have some sort of...
Well, it's a bit dodgy saying this character is good or that one's bad.
Yeah.
There are good actions and there are bad actions and there are good motives and there are bad motives. But if someone is entirely good or bad, they have no place in a story, do they?
But I heard you...
Boring for words.
I mean, I'm now remembering listening to an interview in which you said you so loved writing Mrs. Coulter, you loved writing another character, Bonneville, in this book, not necessarily good or bad, but perhaps on the slightly less kind side. Apparently you dressed up and got shaved to write Mrs. Coulter scenes.
I used to dress properly to write about Mrs. Coulter. I felt in her presence I must show some respect. And I sort of said to her, metaphorically, we've got a scene in a cave now, Mrs. Coulter. It's a nice cave. It's quite swept it out and some flowers in the corner for you. I hope you won't mind. Give you a rather chic, khaki sort of safari suit, so you'll like that. Yeah, you got to treat your characters well.
Is the cave your writing den?
No, that was just the beginning of I can't remember now. I think it was the
where you were taking her. Yes, because and my time is coming to an end, which is heartbreaking because I've got, as I said, I've got many more things I could talk to you about. But talking about where you're writing, I mean, as I said, you take us in this book far across the world. It's such an adventure. It really actually just made me want to go travelling. We go on bus and not plane, but ferry. The wings of various birds and witches' brooms. But your travelling takes place using...
I sit in a very small room at the top of the house, out of which I can see a bit of the village over there on the road going up there. And I can hear interesting agricultural machinery coming down or clanking its way up again. So there's not really very much to see there, but in front of me on the wall, which is only just too far for me to reach, there's a map of the world. But I can't read it because the writing's too small and is that a lake there or is it just, what is it? So I have a pair of binoculars. These are close-up binoculars. I don't know if you've ever tried any of those. They're wonderful for looking at insects and flowers and so on. You can be this far away from an ant and see them in marvelous detail through these things. So I use my close-up binoculars and I look across the tiny room at Central Asia, and there I can see this bit and that bit, and there's Aleppo. Yes, so she's got about 1,500 miles to go over there. So that's where I sit. That's where I travel. Travel's awful, isn't it? Airports and all that business and queuing up and passports and forgetting your luggage. And, what a terrible... And it's too hot. Nobody speaks English, and it's a dreadful place. Get a big map and a pair of close-up binoculars, and you're much better off at home.
But it actually also enables you to take us, and it's sad and wonderful because the Aleppo that you take us to, Lyra describes as elegant and this wonderful, bustling city where everybody is kind and gets on with each other, and it's just a really beautiful, perhaps the Aleppo that once was.
I hope so.
Okay, we're going to move to audience questions, which brilliantly have been pre-submitted, so thank you so much for them. And the first one is from Alice and Catherine, because this is Alice's birthday treat. Just have to, anyway, happy birthday wherever you are. Happy birthday up there.
Happy birthday.
Which of your books was the most fun to write and why?
I think the one I enjoyed most writing was I did an edition of the Grimm Tales of the Brothers Grimm for Penguin Classics, and just retelling those stories was such a joy. Not least because I didn't have to invent anything. It was all there, and what I had to do was tell it as well and as clearly and as simply as I could. That was an enormous pleasure to do that. But I enjoyed this book too, which is very hard to write, very difficult to write. So there are all kinds of pleasures and all kinds of different kinds of enjoyment you can find in writing different kinds of things. But I think the one I enjoyed most was the Grimm Tales.
And this question from Jonathan is sort of really interesting in many ways. So he's asking why you choose to keep the names of some Oxford landmark streets and colleges in Lyra's world the same as in our world, but change others. And if I may just sort of add, in this book as well, so much of the real and the unreal, the way you blend it and how you decide to keep, as I said, Aleppo, but also we have very imaginary kingdoms. People read The Economist in here and The Guardian, but they also read, well, papers I've certainly never heard of. How do you decide where you blend that? No, okay.
You don't decide, I see it.
Right.
I'm using my imagination, you see. Well, it was fun. Also, Oxford is unsatisfactory, I'm afraid, in a number of ways. This theatre that we're sitting in is beautiful to look at, but it's very unsatisfactory if you're sitting right up there trying to hear. So there are things that can be improved, even in the most beautiful cities and places.
I think there was a question. We haven't really spoken hugely about one of the most significant things, of course, the demon. Georgina is asking, do you think we are currently in an era where we're encouraged to deny our demon's existence?
Well, I hope that's something that might occur to a reader, because the demon is, of course, a metaphor. It's a metaphor for what we are like as people, what we are like as human beings. When I first discovered that characters in Lyra's world have demons, when I first discovered that, very early on, everybody's demon could change shape, adults as well as children. And I soon found that was just getting in the way. It wasn't doing anything at all for the story, and it was just a bloody nuisance because I had to... What is it? Oh, blasted dog again. So I had, if I wanted the demon there, and I did, what did it do for the story? What did it mean? Oh, somebody's demon is busy.
He's under the chair.
So I thought about that, and I realized that, as we now know, it's children's demons that change all the time, and adults' demons are fixed. And if your demon fixes itself as a stick insect or a slug, but you can't choose your demon, of course. You just have to make up with whatever you turn out to be. But it's quite a good metaphor. And I went on finding things that I could do with the demons till very late on in the story. Late-ish in this book, there's a chapter called Merchant People, in which Pan overhears a conversation and watches a conversation between some people who are intent on making money out of the desert and out of the new highways that are being constructed and so on. And what we see happening to their demons is that they have been ignored by their people. And they have nothing to do. They just lie there. Some of them even look as if they're dead. At one point we see a woman pick up this demon and drop him into her handbag. Nobody in Lyra's world who understood what their demon was would ever behave like that. So the demon is something that could be misunderstood by the person who it belongs to, the person who it is, because you're the same person as your demon. So quite late on, I was discovering, as I say, how rich this metaphor was.
Yes, I'm really... You said, actually, I've heard you say in an interview, it was the best idea you ever had about having the demon, which is true. But, I mean, you say that about Pan, and we won't give too much away. But also you say no one had ever seen the body of a demon. A demon was alive or it was nowhere, or rather everywhere. When the person died, the demon dissolved into the air. So in terms of what it enables you to discover, I suppose it's also your soul and what happens to your soul when you're no longer here.
Well, we are made up of many parts, as Lyra discovers when she goes to the world of the dead looking for her lost friend Roger.
Yeah.
We also have a ghost. The world of the dead is full of ghosts. Your body dies because you get shot in the heart with an arrow or something. Your demon dies because he or she just vaporizes, disappears into the air. But the part of you that goes into the world of the dead, well, that's got to have a name. It's a ghost. But you're imprisoned in the world of the dead, as Lyra learns, and she learns how to get out of the world of the dead, which is by having a story to tell. Having a story to tell that's a story about the real world. And it's real enough for the harpies, the guardians of the world of the dead, to be intoxicated by it, to hear the story and to want to hear more. So if you want to get out of the world of the dead, live so as to have a story to tell in the world of the dead.
Another question. This is, your world building has always been built upon the real world, as we've discussed, empires and institutions. What drew your inspiration to these parts of history, and can you tell us about the real history that parts of the book are based on?
Well, the Reformation, of course, which was initiated apparently by Martin Luther's profound disagreement with the doctrines of the Roman Catholic Church as it was then, and his nailing of his 97 or whatever it was arguments on the door of the church. Was it with Wittenberg? I can't remember. Anyway, that was one enormous event, which in Lyra's world was changed somewhat because Calvin, who in our world went on to give a spur to the Protestant Reformation. In Lyra's world, he became Pope. And a lot of history changed as a result of that. There are lots of places where I've taken something that we can read about in the history books and made it something you can read about in a novel, which I'm allowed to do. Because there aren't any rules. It's great.
No rules. No, you make the rules.
Well, the only rules there are rules of courtesy to the reader. Don't write so they can't understand it. Courtesy to your characters. Give them something interesting to do, interesting things to say if you can think of them. And simple rules of storytelling. Don't introduce a huge, devastating, life-changing fact 2 chapters before the end. It's the wrong place for it. You know, things like that. Those are the rules.
Talking about those characters, I have to ask, I mean, is Lyra, will we see her again?
Not telling.
I thought in a story you have to tease us something. No.
I don't know.
No, okay.
I don't know. We know she lives at the end because she's the last word in the book. Said Lyra as the last 2 words of the book. And she was the first word in Northern Lights, the first part of his Dark Materials. So she's lasted that far. She's lasted 3,000 pages or whatever it is. Chances are she'll be around for a bit longer.
And said, that's not a spoiler that that's the last 2 lines, said Lyra. It's okay.
I'm not telling you what she said. You've got to read it.
One more audience question, and then what, if anything, would you like future generations to take from his Dark Materials in the Book of Dust? And that's from George.
Most simply the thought that you'd like to read the next one, or read another book, or read more. Or if you've noticed how influenced Lyra is by poetry, she knows a lot of it. When she quotes a piece of poetry, Pan recognizes it. It's deeply a part of her. I'd love people to read poetry. I'd like people to memorize poetry. One way of keeping entropy at bay in your mind is to learn poems. Learn them off by heart. English poems, poems in languages you don't know. Learn them off by heart. Very useful things to have in your head in a long queue, for example. In the queues that began at the beginning of COVID, when we were all queuing up to get into the supermarket, I ran through my entire repertoire of memorized verse. By the time it comes from the end of the queue to the place where you pick up your basket. So no, you do those things. That's what I'd like people to take away.
Do you think of your writing as a form of poetry? I mean, I read the book and I listened to elements being read by the great Michael Sheen, one of many people who's named his daughter Lyra. I know that there are many of them, and it is so inherently poetic. I mean, the way he reads your prose, is that something intentional? I mean, it really is. So much of it is lilting and lyrical.
Well, he is Welsh, of course, and I can read anything beautifully. But no, I wanted it to sound good. I mean, I hear it in my head as I write it down. That's why I can't write with any music going on. I simply don't understand how people can write with music going on. Other sounds don't bother me because they're not rhythmical. Traffic noise isn't rhythmical. Someone drilling a pneumatic drill isn't rhythmical. Children playing or dogs barking. But music depends on rhythm, and the rhythm that you hear when you're writing prose is very important. You haven't got the regular da-dum line of an iambic pentameter, but you have the stresses in this sentence, and they must be varied from the one before, and then they must set up one that comes up. I got to hear it, you know.
Well, talking about that, are you going to read us a little?
Oh, yes. This is a passage from quite early on in the Rosefield, which begins when Lyra finds her way to a ruined city, not far from Aleppo. She's been helped on this part of her journey by a girl she sees being rescued from that shipwreck I mentioned earlier. This girl is called Nurhuda, and I called her that because I was asked by the friends of a girl and family of a girl called Nurhuda who died in the Grenfell Tower disaster, if I could use her name for a character. Now, it didn't bind me to what sort of character it was. It could have been anyone, because that's my decision, not theirs. But I was happy to commemorate her by naming a girl in the story, Nurhuda. Now, this Nurhuda, she's lost her demon because they were separated in this shipwreck. And then Lyra finds her. She comes to this ruined city where she has been told the demons who have been separated from their people go, and they go to look for the people perhaps, or for some other purpose. Anyway, Lyra finds her way to this city, and she knows that Nurhuda's demon was called Jamal because they've talked together. And Nurhuda says, listen. And they're in this ruined city. The white marble shattered statues lie all around, the white colonnades and the black moonlight shadows shining on the path. And then she begins to hear voices, whispers, which might be just sand blowing over the stone. Lyra waited until everything was still. Then she said into the dark, who are you? Are you angels? We are beings of another kind. Are you part of the secret commonwealth? Deeper by far than that. We come from the gulfs between the good numbers. The gulfs between... Did I hear you properly? No reply. Then tell me something else, she said. Tell me what's in the red building in the desert of Karamakan, the building the roses come from. An opening into another world. Lyra was silent for a moment. The stars wheeled overhead. An opening? Do you mean the sort of thing Will used to call a window? A doorway into another world. That is why they guard it so fiercely. The world where the roses come from? They could come from nowhere else. As simple as that, and she hadn't thought of it. A knife-bearer from Cittagazze long ago must have cut that window in his travels from world to world and left it open. Her grasp on things was loosening, and she felt giddy as if she'd lost her sense of up and down, of now and then, of here and of everywhere. The voices said something else, but she didn't understand it. The old Geist. The alphabet? Is that what you said? The Alcahest. Alcahest? What's that? The destroyer of bonds. She heard it clearly, and it was impossible to understand. What do you mean, the destroyer of bonds? What about this Alcahest? What is it? Destroy everything. Lyra was bewildered. It was too much. She dragged herself back to the present task. Where is Nur Huda's demon? Where is Jamal? In the treasury. And where's that? Behind you. Lyra turned to look. The building that had stood there was now a jumbled heap of stones with only a few dry shrubs growing through them. She said, "Who's keeping him prisoner?" "A man who is asleep." Her eyes had become used to the moonlight. It was almost as clear as day, and she stepped easily over the stones and looked more closely at the place called the treasury. It was the sort of place where snakes might hide, and scorpions, and venomous spiders. Oh, there were so many things to be afraid of. When she'd gone a little way into the rubble, she saw a gap in the ground ahead and realized it was the shaft of a great staircase leading deep into the ground. But the steps that led down were not too cluttered with fallen masonry, and the moon was just at the right angle to light the way down, so she had no excuse. Right hand on the wall, left hand held out for balance, she made her way carefully downstairs, aware all the time of the danger of slipping or twisting an ankle, or worse. Down and further down, and still the moonlight lit her way. At the foot of the stairway, though, she had to stop. The passage that led away into the dark was entirely blocked. But there at the side, out of the shaft of moonlight, was a man lying on his back, asleep. At first she thought he was dead. He was so still, and her veins flooded with ice water. But he was snoring quietly, and there was his demon, a small desert mammal of some inconspicuous kind, clinging to his shoulder in her sleep. His face had been battered and torn in what must have been a furious attack, and his left eye was missing. The socket lay empty and blood-clotted. His right arm was resting on something at his side, and when she looked more closely, she could see what it was. A crudely made cage about the size of a shoebox, nailed together from rough planks, with a heavy steel mesh front. Inside the cage was a demon, Nur Huda's demon, a little animal like a mouse with large ears and long back legs like those of a kangaroo. He was crouching in the darkest corner, shivering. "Are you Jamal?" Lyra whispered. "Yes." "Where is Nur Huda?" came the reply, so quiet she could hardly hear it. "She's waiting for us. I'm going to take you back to her. Who is this man?" "He caught me and nailed this cage up, and I can't get out. He was hiding from a big bird, like an eagle. It was going to take me, and he fought to get me away from it, and then he put me in this cage. I'm frightened. Who are you?" "Shh. My name's Lyra. Keep still and don't talk. I don't want to wake him up." She had to reach across the man's body to touch the cage, and he stirred and groaned loudly, starting her. She kept as still as she could till he was snoring again, and then moved her hand to the cage, feeling to see if she could lift it away from his grasp. But it wasn't going to be possible unless she knelt on his chest. There was nowhere else to lean on, and unless she supported her weight somehow, she'd overbalance and wake him up anyway. And her left hand was still painful after her fight with the soldiers on the train from Smyrna just 2 days ago. She felt as far as she could around the cage. The wood was very dry and splintery, and the steel mesh was far too strong to bend and stapled deeply into the wood all around. She sat back to think about it. Jamal whispered, "Please, can you open it?" Shh. She was aware of the moon moving across the sky. The shaft of light was moving too, and unless she got the demon out soon, she'd have to work in the dark. If only the subtle knife. It would cut through the mesh in a moment. 1,000 things distracted her. The smell of the sleeping man, not just a dirty body and unwashed clothes, but something worse, like gangrene. She saw that his leg was injured as well as his eye. He'd probably die soon. The sound of something much deeper underground, the faintest possible rumble, like rocks grinding together. The stillness of the air, the closeness and clamminess down here in the vault. A thought struck her like an arrow. The alethiometer, the metal of the needle. The Welsh miners on the North Sea ferry had noticed it. So had Will a long time before. It was the same colour, the same material as the subtle knife. She moved away a little further, back into the shaft of moonlight, and felt in her rucksack for the alethiometer. Its familiar weight sat in her hand so rightly, and she raised it to her cheek and held it there for a few seconds, loving it. She'd never opened it up, never tried to prise it apart, but there must be a way of doing so. The mechanism had been made by a human being and then put in its gold case, and then the glass had been pressed shut. She could almost hear the click as she thought about it, or else they'd screwed it down. If it had been closed, it could be opened. Malcolm, the skilled mechanic, would know how to do it. What would he do? She held the body of the instrument in her aching left hand and tried to unscrew the glass, as if she were unscrewing the lid of a jar. She'd watched a clockmaker in the covered market in Oxford unscrewing a watch glass, gently, firmly, just like that. She tried, but without success. Either it was stuck after centuries of not being moved, or it wasn't screwed at all. And then came another little memory arrow. Thinking of Malcolm had brought this one. He had found a wooden acorn with a message in it, and he couldn't open it until he tried unscrewing the wrong way, clockwise. So she tried that, and it worked. The glass turned smoothly as if it had been made the day before, and after 3 revolutions it came away in her hand. The dial of the alethiometer with its 36 tiny pictures lay open to the moonlight. Its 3 black hands were pointing to the camel, the angel, and the walled garden. But the symbols didn't matter for now. It was the silver-grey needle that was important, slender, infinitely sharp, quivering in the air of Madinat al-Kamar as the air of Prague drifted away from it. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the heavy golden instrument, so beautiful, a companion for 10 years or more, the guide that had led her safely into other worlds and into the world of the dead and then home again. With all the delicacy her pain-filled bones and exhausted muscles could manage, she lifted out the needle. It came away easily from its shaft. There was so little of it, it could have weighed only a little more than a hair. She was immediately terrified of dropping it. If that happened, she'd never find it again. She held it between the thumb and forefinger of her right hand, and they were damp with sweat and fear, so she laid it carefully on the open palm of her left hand and wiped her right hand on the fabric of her blouse, though that was wet too. So she rubbed her fingers instead into the dust of the floor, which did work, and then took the needle again. "Stay at the back and keep still," she whispered to Jamal. The little demon, who'd been peering through the mesh, darted into the shadow at the back of the cage. Lyra thought, "I don't know if this will work, but it's all there is." Whatever she did would depend on her left hand not giving way. She had to lean on it a little or not reach the cage at all, but it hurt so much. She leaned over the sleeping man, put her left hand on the top of the cage, and very slowly let it take her weight as she reached over with her right. Gripping the needle as firmly as she could, she pressed the edge of it, just behind the point, to the steel mesh. The wire was thick and heavy, and it would have needed a bolt cutter and a strong wrist to make an impression on it, but it parted like a cobweb. Lyra wanted to shout with triumph, but she'd hardly started. One by one, keeping her mind on everything about the task, she cut through each of the strands of wire until the entire front fell away loose. "Wait," she whispered, as Jamal had come to the front of the cage and looked as if he wanted to leap out at once. But the sleeping man was stirring. He must have felt the cage shift under his hand when the front fell away. He groaned and lifted his arm and touched Lyra's and woke at once. He shouted in fear and seized her wrist. His one eye glittered open wide. "Jamal, run!" Lyra called, and the little demon sprang over them both and darted up the staircase like a spark along a fuse. Thank you.
I mean, I think as we've alluded to, we've tried to, this whole book is such a testament, an exploration, a testament to the power of storytelling. And just looking around the room while you were reading that, you can just see this is such a testament to it too. Just could hear a pin drop, spellbound. So thank you. For showing us how it's done. And thank you all very, very much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming along this afternoon, and I'd just like to add my voice once more to say we've just been part of a fabulous and exquisite conversation, so thank you ever so much to the two of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just need to remind you that for those of you who haven't collected your prepaid books, then you just need the station here on the left, and for any of you who want to buy a copy, there are copies available on the right-hand side. But thank you very much for coming along once again. Thank you.
Thank you. And, yeah.
Come off this.